Today we're going to be looking at some articles about
Yeah.
the conflict in Ukraine and
hmm
some of the potential ramifications
Yeah.
of that conflict.
Pretty heavy stuff for sure.
Yeah, not exactly light reading.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking about the potential for nuclear war here, and
Yeah.
and not just sort of a limited regional conflict,
Yes.
but a full-blown global catastrophe.
A global one, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that's really alarming is just how quickly things seem to be escalating.
Right.
One of the articles actually uses the phrase sleepwalking into Armageddon
Wow.
and points to 5 key factors that are kind of pushing us closer to the edge here.
5 key factors pushing us toward Armageddon.
Yeah, toward a conflict that could make the Cold War look like a picnic.
Okay, wow, that's
Mm-hmm.
a chilling thought.
Mm-hmm.
So let's break down these 5 factors.
Okay.
What's the first one that has everyone so worried?
Well, right off the bat, they talk about the expansion of the conflict beyond Ukraine's borders.
Okay.
One of the articles specifically mentions Ukraine's use of long-range missiles
Mhm.
authorized by the U.S.
Okay.
and how that could provoke Russia into striking back beyond Ukrainian territory.
Right.
It even suggests that we could see attacks on NATO supply lines in Poland or Romania.
So wait, these missiles, they actually have the range to hit targets in other countries.
Yeah,
That seems incredibly risky.
that's the concern.
Isn't that exactly the kind of thing that could trigger a wider war?
Yeah, it's like stepping on the gas pedal when you're already teetering on the edge of a cliff.
Oh, yeah.
One of the articles quotes a military analyst who compares this situation to the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Wow.
where the world came terrifyingly close to nuclear war because of the placement of Soviet missiles in Cuba.
Right, yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
That's not exactly a comparison that inspires confidence.
No, not at all.
So expanding beyond Ukraine's borders, that's factor 1. What's the next domino to fall in this scenario?
Direct involvement of superpowers.
Okay.
Sending long-range missiles isn't just about supplying weapons,
Right.
It signifies a deeper level of U.S. involvement. The article actually points out that Russia may see this as a direct attack by the U.S.
Right.
And they even use the phrase, a declaration of proxy war.
That's a really scary thought. I mean, historically, when superpowers start picking sides and getting directly involved in regional conflicts, it rarely ends peacefully. Does anyone really think this is a good idea?
Well, some argue that a show of force is necessary to deter Russia and prevent an even larger conflict.
Okay.
But the articles we're looking at today, they warn that this strategy could backfire spectacularly.
So this show of force could actually increase the chances of a full-blown war.
Yeah,
That seems counterintuitive, but I guess we're dealing with some seriously complex geopolitics here.
exactly.
Okay, so we've got the potential expansion of the conflict and the direct involvement of superpowers. What's the third factor that's got these experts so worried?
The arms race.
Okay.
One article explicitly states that this conflict has the potential to reignite a global arms race not seen since the height of the Cold War.
Wow.
It points to increased military spending by both Russia and the West,
Right.
with both sides scrambling to develop even more powerful and destructive weapons.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
The more each side fears the other,
Yeah.
the more they build up their arsenals, which just leads to more fear and more weapons. It's a terrifying cycle.
It is. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And it seems like everyone's losing sight of the bigger picture here.
Right.
They're so focused on winning the current battle that they're forgetting about the potential cost of a larger war.
Okay, 2 more factors to go.
Right.
What's the next piece of this very unsettling puzzle?
The breakdown of diplomacy.
Oh.
The articles highlight the already strained relations between Russia and the West.
Well,
And this recent development with the missiles,
yeah,
it's not going to help.
right.
One article even quotes a diplomat saying the channels of communication have essentially been shut down.
So if things keep escalating, we don't even have the communication channels open to de-escalate the situation.
Right. It's a very dangerous situation.
That's just terrifyingly bad.
Yeah.
All right, what's the final factor adding to this powder keg?
The last one is global instability.
Okay.
This conflict isn't happening in a vacuum.
Right?
We're already dealing with economic crises, social unrest,
Yeah.
political polarization,
Right.
and climate change.
Yeah, it feels like
This conflict just throws gasoline on an already raging fire.
the whole world is on edge right now.
Yeah, making everything more unpredictable and volatile.
So we have these 5 factors all pushing us towards the brink. But what really has me spooked is how these articles go beyond a conventional war scenario. They're talking about nuclear war, something most of us thought was a relic of the 20th century.
Right. And to understand why that's so terrifying, we have to talk about the reality of modern nuclear weapons.
Okay.
It's not just a bigger bang, it's like a whole different level of destruction.
Okay, so everyone knows about Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Right.
Those names are synonymous with the horrors of nuclear war. But how do those bombs compare to what we have today?
Well, for starters, the bombs used in World War II were fission bombs,
Oh,
while many modern nuclear weapons are thermonuclear or hydrogen bombs.
okay.
These are hundreds of times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
Hundreds of times. Seriously.
Hundreds of times.
What does that even mean in terms of actual impact? Can you give us some perspective?
Yeah, so one of the articles cites a simulation that estimated that the detonation of a modern nuclear weapon in a major city could result in millions of immediate casualties.
Millions?
Yeah.
Wow.
For comparison, Hiroshima had tens of thousands of immediate casualties.
Millions versus tens of thousands.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to comprehend the scale of that.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
But the articles also talk about a global impact
Right, yeah.
that goes beyond the initial blast. What are they talking about?
Right, so the immediate destruction is horrific enough,
Yeah.
but the long-term consequences are truly devastating.
Okay.
One article goes into detail about the possibility of something called nuclear winter.
Nuclear winter, that sounds pretty bleak.
It is.
Okay.
The basic idea is that multiple nuclear detonations would throw so much debris and dust into the atmosphere
Right.
that it would block out the sun, leading to a dramatic drop in global temperatures.
Wow.
It's not just a matter of it being cold.
Right.
We're talking widespread crop failures, collapse of ecosystems, and potentially mass starvation.
So even if you somehow survive the initial blast,
Right.
the aftermath sounds like the end of the world as we know it.
And we're not even factoring in the collapse of infrastructure.
Right.
Communication networks, power grids, transportation systems, healthcare, all gone. Plus, there's the long-term contamination from radiation,
Yeah.
making vast areas of land uninhabitable for generations.
Wow. It's just one horrifying consequence after another. So when these articles talk about living in a post-nuclear world,
Right.
what does that world even look like? What would life actually be like?
It's not a pretty picture.
Okay.
The articles paint a vision of total societal and economic collapse.
Right.
Imagine a world where resources like food, water, and medicine are incredibly scarce.
Right.
We'd see unprecedented health crises, mass migrations of people fleeing contaminated areas,
Yeah.
constant conflict over whatever resources are left.
It's a fight for survival in the most basic sense.
Yeah, it's a very, very grim scenario.
You saw a lot to digest, and I know we're painting a very grim picture here,
Yeah.
but I think it's important to really grapple with the potential consequences of what we're talking about.
I agree. Sometimes you have to stare into the abyss to understand the gravity of the situation.
Okay, so we've laid out the problem. Now what about solutions? These articles can't leave us hanging on a cliffhanger like that, can they? What can we actually do
Yeah.
in the face of something this massive and terrifying?
Well, they don't offer any easy answers, that's for sure. But they do emphasize the urgent need for diplomacy and international cooperation. One article even uses the term a global security compact.
The global security compact.
Yeah, to describe the level of cooperation needed to prevent a catastrophic war.
That sounds like a tall order, especially when trust seems to be at an all-time low.
It is.
But I guess when the alternative is nuclear annihilation,
Right.
you have to aim high, right?
Absolutely. And the article stressed that we need to shift the conversation from, military posturing to serious good faith negotiations.
Right.
We need to be talking about de-escalation confidence building measures
Right.
and finding common ground. It won't be easy, but it's the only path forward.
Yeah. But how do we even begin to have those conversations when tensions are this high? Isn't there a risk that any attempt at diplomacy could be seen as weakness?
Yeah, that's where things get tricky. One article actually suggests that we need to engage with Russia through back channels.
Back channels.
Yeah, using intermediaries to try and open lines of communication without the glare of the media spotlight.
Right.
It's a delicate dance, but we need to find a way to talk.
It's crazy to think that in this day and age, with all our technology and interconnectedness, we're relying on secret back channels to prevent a global war. But I guess desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah, one of the articles reminded me of something John F. Kennedy said during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh, okay.
Above all, while defending our own vital interests, Nuclear powers must avert those confrontations, which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war.
Wow.
It's a powerful reminder that we can't back Russia into a corner where they feel like their only options are surrender or annihilation.
That's a really insightful point. So, diplomacy back channels. Finding a way to talk without forcing Russia into a corner. It all sounds incredibly complex and fragile. But these articles are also talking about nuclear disarmament, which seems like a pipe dream in the current climate. Is that even a realistic goal right now?
Well, the articles acknowledge that disarmament is a long-term goal,
Okay.
but they argue that we need to start laying the groundwork now.
Okay.
One article specifically mentions the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons,
Okay.
which has been ratified by over 60 countries as a starting point for building a global consensus against these weapons.
Okay, but how do we get the major nuclear powers, especially the US and Russia, on board with something like that? They seem pretty invested in their nuclear arsenals.
That's the million-dollar question. The article suggests a multi-pronged approach,
Okay.
increasing public pressure on government-supporting organizations, working on disarmament, and pushing for more transparency and accountability when it comes to nuclear weapons policies.
So it's not just about top-down diplomacy. It's about building a grassroots movement to change the conversation around nuclear weapons.
Exactly. We can't just wait for our leaders to do the right thing. We need to demand it.
This all sounds like a long and difficult road.
It is.
But the alternative, as we've discussed, is just too horrifying to contemplate. I guess it's like that old saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
That's a powerful quote, and it's a reminder that we all have a role to play in preventing a catastrophe.
So what can we as individuals actually do? What are some concrete steps we can take to make a difference?
Well, first and foremost, educate yourself.
Okay.
The more you understand the complexities of this issue,
Right.
the better equipped you'll be to advocate for change.
Okay.
There are some incredible organizations and resources out there dedicated to promoting peace and nuclear disarmament. For example, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons won the Nobel Peace Prize a few years back for their work in this area.
Okay, so knowledge is power. But it's not just about knowing the facts, right? It's about sharing them, talking to friends, family, colleagues, getting these conversations started.
Absolutely. We need to break the silence around this issue. Too often, people shy away from talking about nuclear war because it's just too scary.
Yeah, it is scary.
But that silence only benefits those who are pushing us closer to the brink.
So what you're saying is talk about it. Don't be afraid to bring it up, even if it makes people uncomfortable.
Right, and then take that awareness and turn it into action.
Okay.
Support those organizations working towards peace. Write to your elected officials. Participate in peaceful demonstrations.
You know, it's easy to feel powerless in the face of something this big. But even small actions can make a difference. Donating to organizations working on conflict resolution, signing petitions calling for nuclear disarmament, every little bit helps.
Yeah.
It all adds up to a collective movement for change.
Exactly, and don't underestimate the power of simply talking about this. Having open and honest conversations with the people around you can raise awareness, challenge assumptions, and inspire others to get involved.
You know, these articles have really brought home the fact that this isn't just about politics or international relations. This is about our shared humanity, our collective future. And the choices we make today will determine what that future looks like.
Absolutely, and it's important to remember that there are diverse perspectives on this issue,
Right.
even within the sources you shared. Some emphasize the immediate threat, while others focus on the long-term consequences.
Right.
Some advocate for stronger deterrence, while others call for immediate de-escalation.
That's a good point. It's not a black and white issue. There are legitimate concerns on all sides, and engaging with those different viewpoints is essential for meaningful dialogue.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond simplistic narratives and acknowledging that we're all dealing with a complex and frightening reality. It's about finding common ground even when it feels impossible. And it's about remembering that even in the darkest of times, there's always hope.
Hope that we can learn from the mistakes of the past. Hope that we can choose dialogue over conflict. Hope that we can build a future where the threat of nuclear war is nothing more than a distant memory.
That's the hope we have to cling to, and it's a hope that's worth fighting for.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the very real and very urgent threat of nuclear conflict, I think the takeaway is this despair is not an option. We can't afford to be paralyzed by fear.
Right. We have to acknowledge the gravity of the situation, but we also have to remember that we have agency. we have the power to choose a different path.
And that starts with each of us, right?
Yeah, every conversation we have, every action we take, every choice we make, it all contributes to shaping the world around us.
Yeah, and if enough of us choose hope over fear, dialogue over conflict over war, well, that's how we start to shift the tide.
Right, it's not about, waiting for someone else to fix this. It's about each of us taking responsibility.
We're not just passive observers in this story.
Yeah, we're active participants.
Yeah, the ending hasn't been written yet.
The ending is yet to be written.
So to our listeners, as we wrap up this deep dive into the very real and very urgent threat of nuclear conflict, what will your contribution be?
Yeah, what will you do to help build a world where peace is not just a dream, but a reality?
The future's in our hands.
Let's choose wisely.
Let's choose wisely.